I have to say is my most favorite part of the whole program coming up, because we're going to get to hear from just an incredible person. And I want to say that it's been so inspiring to have a front row seat watching the journey that Kathryn has been on. And I would say without her courage to stand up and tell her story, and courage with a capital C to do that, for her to stand up and tell her story in the way she has, and then to not just tell it once, but keep telling it and keep moving and getting the national partners and the state partners and the private partners. I mean, when we think about the thousands of people that are watching today, all of us are here because of one common denominator. We're here because we've got a courageous First Lady who is on the front edge of trying to drive change. And I know personally, having been with her across the state, that she's touched the lives of many, and I believe the work that she and all of you are doing is not just transforming lives, but it's saving lives. So let's give it up for the most amazing First Lady, Kathryn.
Can you bring me some water? Okay.
One of the things we learned is you can't whisper on stage.
Oh, you can't whisper when you have a mic on because people can hear you? Okay, sorry. Good to know. Good to know. I would like some water, please. That's what I was whispering to him. Anyway. Thank you. That's awesome.
I know my job.
Okay, perfect. I'll tell you what, let's give it up for the coolest governor across the nation, right? And I am so grateful for such a supportive partner who, you know, not only supports me, but is supporting so many people across our state to reach their full potential. You know, because in a lot of ways, that's what this is all about. That's what recovery is about. You know, reaching your full potential and creating those opportunities. I am so grateful to be here with you today. And I'm just going to start with, I would not be here today without my recovery. And I'm so grateful. And for the last 3 years, I've sought to use my face and voice to end the stigma surrounding the disease of addiction. But this was never part of my plan. Just like it was never part of my plan to be First Lady of anything. But, you know, early in my time as First Lady, before I did my first interview, about 5 minutes before I did the interview, I said to Doug, I'm going to talk about my addiction and my recovery. I felt compelled to share my story, but I hadn't really talked about it for 15 years. I kept my addiction and my recovery in a closet like a shameful secret. But then I heard William Moyers, who's a very well-known advocate for treatment, addiction, and recovery. I heard him speak, and he said that we need to tell our stories. We need to talk about the disease of addiction in order to eliminate the stigma. Because talking will normalize the conversation. People talking about how addiction has impacted their lives and sharing their stories, every single one of those people that are talking will be saving lives. Because more people will reach out for help. Just because it'll be much easier because it's a normal part of conversation. So my struggle with addiction started when I was in high school in Jamestown, North Dakota, when I first started drinking. I had my first blackout from alcohol when I was in high school. As a teenager, I was involved in everything. You know, on the outside, it looked like I had everything. I was involved in everything. I was in sports. I was in choir. I was an honor student. But on the inside, I was really struggling, and there were a lot of days when I didn't want to get out of bed. But I didn't really know why. But I knew that I had these voices in my head that would tell me that I was stupid, that I always made mistakes, and that I needed to be perfect. I didn't really have friends or resources in school that I could reach out to for help with my struggles. And my family is very Scandinavian. My mother is Swedish, my dad is Norwegian, and I call myself a Viking. And some of you may be able to relate to this, but we didn't talk about our feelings, and we didn't talk about our struggles, and we didn't talk about that it was okay to reach out for help. But drinking helped to quiet those voices in my head. But that started a cycle of addiction that would last over 20 years of my life and included treatment and 8 years of relapsing. There are two things that really made a difference for me in my recovery. Number one, asking for help. And two, a supportive work environment. I started to face my addiction when I reached out to my team leader at work and shared that I needed help for my addiction. She was initially surprised when I shared this news, and she said, "I can name 5 people I think would need help for their addiction, and you would not be on that list." I was good at hiding my addiction. But you know what? She didn't look at me as less than. She didn't make me feel ashamed. She simply listened. She showed me compassion, and she supported me to go to treatment. And that's an experience that I'll forever be grateful for. But addiction is a relapsing disease. And unfortunately, I didn't stay sober after treatment. It started me down the path of relapsing for 8 years. At the lowest point in my life, I didn't have a lot of faith, but I said a little prayer. And I just said, if there's anybody out there, I need help. And I have been sober since I spoke those words, which is over 17 years now. Thank you. I really call that a divine intervention moment in my life. But I also found a recovery program that's built on a foundation of gratitude, helping others and a higher power, and that has saved my life. There's 22 million people across the United States that have the disease of addiction, and nearly 70% of them are employed full-time. Addiction does not discriminate. It does not have a face. It can look like you, or me, or your coworkers. We need to continue to break down the social barriers of stigma by meeting people where they are. And so often the point of intervention for someone struggling is in the workplace, where we spend most of our time. My openness about my recovery has started what I hope will be a lifetime of advocacy, helping others, people, families, and communities impacted by the disease of addiction. This unexpected journey has opened doors to reducing the stigma that I faced in my own addiction and recovery journey. Recovery Reinvented has always been bigger than me. It's all of the advocates, people with lived experience, the service providers that are in the trenches, state, local, and community leaders. It's truly the sum of all the impassioned parts working together. It has inspired my ultimate mission to end the shame and stigma of the chronic disease of addiction. Stigma is defined as a mark of disgrace, and it's a persistent barrier to confronting addiction and finding recovery. Stigma puts up walls instead of building bridges. It's socially constructed, based in fear, and usually contains inaccurate information. I met the parents of a teenage boy who died of an opioid overdose in his truck in his high school parking lot. Those parents were devastated by their son's needless death. However, there was no outpouring of support for them like there would be if their child had died in a car accident or because of cancer. Shame and stigma keeps people away. Now, it may come as a surprise to you, because it was to me the first time I heard William Moyers say that the simple solution for eliminating stigma is talk. Everyone speaking out about how addiction and recovery has impacted their lives will be saving lives, and the stigma will be eliminated. This is a grassroots movement. It costs nothing, it needs no legislation, and it could easily be the one thing that crosses all political party lines to unite us across our nation. This can bridge the gaps in understanding and open the doors to healing, connection, and recovery. Because people struggling should never feel alone. There's always help, and there is always hope for recovery. So today, I stand in front of you grateful to be First Lady of North Dakota. And so grateful to be with you, helping to eliminate the stigma of addiction. Again, I know I would not be here if not for my recovery. So let's start today by working together to shatter the stigma of addiction and be inspired to create supportive cultures for recovery everywhere, at home, where we work, and in our communities. I challenge all of you today to find 3 people in the next 3 days and talk with them about how addiction has impacted your life, what you know about addiction, whatever you want to talk about related to addiction, and then ask them to ask 3 people to do the same thing. And let's just get that wave of talk spreading across our state and our nation. Because now is the time to put aside stereotypes. And it's the time to put aside intolerance. Because now is the time for all of us to come together to help those that are suffering from the disease of addiction. Now is the time for every one of us to take action in our own lives, in our communities, and at work. There is no shame in addiction, and there is so much hope and possibility in recovery. And I am like the more than 22 million people across our nation that suffer from the disease of addiction. But I am a grateful face and voice of recovery. Thank you.